Differences between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump on the main issues facing the United States. In U.S. politics, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump represent markedly different positions and approaches to the challenges the country faces. On topics such as migration, employment, the economy, labor, drug control, and gun control, their differences are deep and reflect the opposing visions of their respective political parties, the Democratic and Republican parties. Migration. Kamala Harris, as a member of the Democratic Party, Harris has promoted a more inclusive and humanitarian stance on migration. She has advocated for the regularization of Dreamers, young people who arrived in the U.S. as children without proper documentation, and has called for comprehensive immigration reform that would facilitate citizenship for undocumented immigrants who contribute to society. She also supports policies that allow for a more humane treatment of migrants at the border, such as ending family separation. Donald Trump, on the other hand, has maintained a firm and restrictive stance on migration. During his term, he advocated for the construction of a wall on the U.S. Mexico border and implemented zero-tolerance policies, resulting in the separation of migrant families at the border. He also focused on reducing the number of immigrants entering the country and tightening the requirements for asylum, arguing that illegal immigration poses a threat to the security and economy of the United States. Employment and internal economy. Harris supports greater government intervention in the economy to promote social equity and job creation. Her policies focus on increasing the federal minimum wage, strengthening labor rights, especially for minorities and women, and providing more social benefits such as access to universal health care. The Vice President has advocated for greater investment in clean energy and technology as a way to stimulate the economy and create sustainable jobs in the long term. Donald Trump, true to the Republican doctrine, Trump favors an economy based on deregulation and tax cuts. During his term, he implemented significant tax cuts for businesses and sought to eliminate environmental regulations to boost traditional industries such as oil and gas. Trump has argued that these cuts stimulate business investment and, therefore, job creation. He also pushed for the revitalization of the manufacturing sector and promoted America First policies to protect domestic jobs. External economy. Harris and the Democratic administration have maintained a multilateralist stance, supporting international agreements and cooperation with traditional allies. In economic terms, Harris promotes trade agreements that include labor rights and environmental standards to protect American workers while combating climate change. She also advocates for a global approach to post-pandemic economic recovery. Donald Trump. Trump's external economic policy is characterized by economic nationalism and the renegotiation of treaties to secure favorable conditions for the United States. He withdrew from international agreements he considered detrimental, such as the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and renegotiated NAFTA, resulting in the new USMCA United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. Additionally, Trump initiated a trade war with China to address the trade deficit and protect U.S. intellectual property, imposing tariffs on Chinese imports. Labor. Kamala Harris. Harris advocates for policies that strengthen the protection of labor rights, including unionization and collective bargaining. She calls for equal pay and support for vulnerable sectors, such as essential service workers and working women. She also promotes expanded access to education and professional training to improve job opportunities. Donald Trump. Trump focused his efforts on reducing bureaucracy and regulations to facilitate job creation, particularly in traditional sectors such as manufacturing and energy. He also emphasized the importance of technical and vocational training to improve the skills of American workers and promote economic self-sufficiency, maintaining a more pragmatic approach to labor rights. Drug control. Kamala Harris, who was California's Attorney General, advocates for drug control reform focused more on public health than criminalization. She supports federal decriminalization of marijuana and advocates for the expungement of criminal records for minor drug offenses. Her approach leans toward treatment and rehabilitation rather than strict prosecution, especially in minority communities disproportionately affected by the war on drugs. Donald Trump adopted a tough stance on drugs during his term, supporting strict measures against traffickers and reinforcing border security to combat drug trafficking. He implemented measures to reduce the opioid crisis, including restrictions on the prescription of painkillers and awareness campaigns, but his overall approach was to increase enforcement and punish those responsible. Gun control. Kamala Harris is a strong advocate for greater gun control in the United States. She proposes strengthening background checks for gun buyers, banning assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, and closing legal loopholes that allow the sale of firearms without adequate verification. Her approach is based on preventing gun violence through stricter regulations. Donald Trump, aligned with the traditional Republican stance, Trump is a defender of the right to bear arms, as guaranteed by the Second Amendment. During his presidency, he blocked initiatives for stricter gun control and received support from the National Rifle Association (NRA). His focus is on protecting the rights of legal gun owners and addressing gun violence through security and mental health measures rather than restricting access to firearms. Conclusion. The differences between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are clear on the major issues facing the United States. Harris represents a more progressive vision, focused on inclusion, equality, and government intervention to solve social and economic problems. Trump, on the other hand, maintains a conservative perspective, favoring deregulation, tax cuts, and protecting national interests over international cooperation. These differences not only reflect their individual positions but also those of their parties and the deep political and social divisions that exist in the United States.